Globalization has transformed economies, societies and cultures, bringing both opportunities and challenges. While some view globalization as a driver of economic growth, innovation and cultural exchange, others argue that it harms jobs, increases inequality, and jeopardizes national identity. Critics argue that globalization has destroyed manufacturing jobs in developed nations. By outsourcing labor to countries with lower wages, multinational companies have cut jobs and depressed wages in the United States and Europe. The shift from Made in America to Made in China has had real consequences. From 2000 to 2010, the United States lost 6 million factory jobs, and workers who find new jobs often face lower wages and job insecurity. If IKEA is opening factories in Poland, it means less jobs are being created in Sweden. Good for Poland, but bad for Sweden. Additionally, globalization has led to worker exploitation in lower-income countries. Call center workers in Asia, for example, often have to adopt fake Western names and accents while working night shifts to match US business hours. Critics argue that labor laws in developing nations are weaker, allowing multinational corporations to take advantage of lower wages and fewer worker protections. On the other hand, supporters argue that globalization creates jobs and increases wages worldwide. As an example, the Philippines business process outsourcing sector has provided high-paying jobs in financial services, customer support and IT. Supporters of globalization also emphasize that free trade increases national wealth and efficiency. Lower costs for raw materials and labor reduce inflation, making goods more affordable for consumers. Sectors that export high-value goods often create high-paying jobs, benefiting skilled workers. The real debate lies in whether the overall economic gains outperform the localized pain of job losses or not. One of the most complex arguments against globalization is that it widens the income gap. From 1980 to 2018, the top 1% of global earners increased their share of income from 16% to 20%, while the middle class in developed nations experienced stagnation. Critics say globalization favors highly skilled workers who can compete internationally, while blue-collar workers suffer wage stagnation and job displacement. Supporters argue that while inequality may rise within countries, global inequality has decreased. Developing nations like Vietnam and Thailand have narrowed their income gaps with Western economies due to globalization. Supporters also say that while globalization may not be the sole cause of income inequality, it is clear that countries with better education and skill development programs experience lower inequality levels. This highlights the importance of domestic policies in managing globalization's impact. Critics argue that globalization destroys cultural diversity, leading to a world where everyone eats McDonald's, wears Nike, and watches Hollywood films. Terms like Coca-Colanization or McDonaldization reflect fears that Western multinational corporations are erasing traditional customs, languages, and businesses in favor of mass consumerism. Supporters, on the other hand, argue that globalization enhances cultural exchange rather than destroying it. The rise of K-pop, Bollywood, and Afrobeats demonstrates how non-Western cultures gain global influence through globalization. Additionally, companies like McDonald's often adapt to local cultures, offering a teriyaki burger in Japan. So, cultural globalization can in fact be a two-way street. Opponents argue that globalization weakens national autonomy by empowering supranational organizations like the WTO, IMF, and United Nations. They claim that these entities force nations to comply with global trade rules, often at the expense of local industries and policies. There are concerns that corporate influence outweighs government power, as multinational companies sometimes dictate policies by threatening to relocate factories or investments. On the other hand, supporters say that globalization has spread democracy and human rights worldwide. International pressure has helped stop human rights violations and promoted women's rights, labor rights, and racial justice. Environmentalists argue that globalization fuels a race to the bottom, where countries weaken environmental regulations to attract foreign investment. Western companies are accused of moving factories to countries with weak environmental laws, resulting in pollution and deforestation. A notable example is the fast fashion industry, where companies outsource textile production to low-wage countries, often causing water pollution and excessive carbon emissions. Supporters argue that globalization drives environmental solutions through international agreements like the Paris Climate Accord. Businesses are now held accountable for their supply chains, and many have committed to carbon neutrality goals. The globalization debate is far from settled. It has raised living standards, connected cultures, and spurred economic growth. But it has also created inequality, cultural tensions, and environmental challenges. The real question is not should we embrace or reject globalization, but rather how can we shape globalization to work for everyone? Responsible policies, ethical business practices, and international cooperation are key to ensuring that globalization benefits people, not just corporations.